During the recent chapter of 100 Years Quest, we were introduced to Kirin and Kirin's very odd moment where he's decided he's taken a liking to Laxus and he's going to start actually trying to fight him a little bit more seriously. And when he starts to flex his power, Laxus has this moment where he's questioning like the nature of this dude's magic in general and saying that it feels a lot like Gildarts'. Now, before I get into the video, and then obviously the title of this video, I'm just kind of like, for the most part, I think that the most rooted and grounded like thing I'm trying to get at is like, oh yes, I'm trying to connect a couple pieces together. Granted, like this is obviously speculation. There's not a statement by like Kirin about like anything of like confirming with Gildarts or anything. This is mainly just based off of hints, at least what I think are hints, and then logically how I think those connect together to have this make sense. So, as it is, we have Kirin apparently has a magic power similar to that of Gildarts'. And I don't think when Laxus was saying it, it was like a power level thing. It was like, oh, his power level of magic is similar to Gildarts'. I think it's more of the magic in its nature and how it feels similar to that of Gildarts'. And we know for say when Nineheart experienced Urza, flexing on his Historia, he was able to kind of like connect the pieces of like how her magic felt, how Irene's magic felt. So clearly there's a similarity between siblings and family members for their magic and kind of like how it just seems to could like be constructed, like whatever its nature is and whatever its I don't know if it'd be like just a vibe, because we don't have anything like in depth of like what magic feels like in specific codes, like whatever a very unique standout one would be. Because we know like general magic sensing and stuff, but we like there's for instance Bleach, there's that part where Okiora uses his Resurrection and then it feels like a ocean of Ryatsu is like above them from what you said, and then like the thick Ryatsu coming off of them made it look like it was raining. One of those things where it just gives like a unique spice to this character's like general power flex, not even like their abilities themselves, but just this is what my raw energy exuding self gives off. So there's reason for that, but on top of that, and I think that's like the first part. I've really kind of constructed 3 major points, and the first one is, okay, well, I think that it doesn't make sense for the name drop to just be Laxus, like from Laxus rather, about specifically Gildarts. I feel like if Mishima was just going to hype up his power, he would kind of have one of those like, oh, I can't even, I've never felt the power like this before. It's like, something where it's more bewilderment of like the raw amount rather than a connecting point. Because whenever we've had a character like that where it's trying to connect something of their likeness to a likeness of another character, and I'll give an example, it's not the same thing, but with like smell, Natsu is able to smell silver and Sting is able to smell Larcade and kind of like put some pieces together. It's not the same thing, obviously. Your magic and its general kind of like vibe and presence is the same as like how you smell, but it's used in a way that Mishima has shown that there are similarity kind of like rail points where it's like, oh, okay, well, this obviously was brought up for a reason, and logically through connecting another couple points you're able to see like, well, I can see how this might make sense. Granted, like I said, this is obviously all speculation, but as it were, there's another point that I like to bring up, and that's probably the easiest one, and then the last one I think is the biggest one to kind of like give it all a viable, okay, yeah, this is why I feel like it makes the most sense from a narrative standpoint, from a writing standpoint. But the second one is that Mishima did say that Sting, Rogue, and Gildarts would show up again in 100 Years Quest, so at some point they're going to be arriving and partaking in whatever the plot is at that point in time. And again, the thing about Selene, I've mentioned it a million times in my other videos, Selene as currently one of the three strongest characters in the entire world of not even just like the planet, but like Fairy Tail's existence in general. Like the only character above them right now still existent is God as Ankh-Saram, but like we don't know anything about Ankh-Saram whatsoever. So it's really just Viernes, Igni, and Selene. And Selene, with her whole cross-dimensional travels and portals, she can literally just grab somebody at any point, teleport them over. She's can do it so fast they don't even realize what happened. And on top of that, she's so powerful in comparison to pretty much everybody else that like there's no resistance. She's just gonna get what she wants. And when you look at that, it's like, oh, okay, there is a potential nod, potential kind of nudge at a Gildarts event in the future. And like I said, that stuff with Laxus and him saying about Kirin's magic could just be a power level thing. I don't think so, though. Personally, I feel like Mishima, every time he's ever kind of like done a specific connection, he's done it for a reason. But the last thing, and I think again, this to me is like the kind of like cherry on top in terms of a theory, because like I have something that just happened that makes sense of like why it would lead into these other things, of like Kirin being related to Gildarts, some form of sibling, cousin, brother, whatever. Maybe they're just from the same clan or family. Because when I mentioned the third thing, think about this: we are like in terms of just the manga, we're like almost 650 chapters of just original Fairy Tail and then Other Year's Quest, and then you factor in all the canon material, Ice Trail, Fairy Girls, Twin Giants of Sabretooth, Road Knight, Thunder Legion. You do pretty much everything. Both movies, both story arcs, and the animes. There's a lot of canon material. So, like, adding them up all together, like, if you include all the canon material, Fairy Tail's manga is probably, like, 900 plus chapters. So, it's something that has a lot of just general content to it. And why I bring up the numbers and talk about not just the main manga, but, like, canon spin-offs, canon stuff in the anime and the movies, all of that, we have no real backstory on Gildarts. We don't really have anything in terms of his origin whatsoever. I always thought that was really funny because you have Shanks in One Piece, and you know the comparison that Gildarts always got shafted with, because they made him look so much more similar in the anime, where it's like there are a couple things, mainly the arm and then a little bit of that the cloak and stuff. But it's like if you actually go by the manga versions, like Gildarts and Shanks don't really look much alike. But I always thought it was funny that it's like Shanks' character, we know about it, so a majority I would assume of his backstory, but you don't get a ton of his character because he doesn't show up a lot. Like anytime he shows up, it's like, okay, well, there's going to be a nudging at some form of like the plot point moving. But Gildarts, on the other hand, we've gotten a good amount of character content from him, and you know, we've seen him and like his connections to the other members of the guild, and he's partaken in arcs. But we don't really know anything about his backstory. The only thing we really have about his earlier life, we have like, you know, this stuff with like Natsu and kind of like, well, I kind of count that rather, because with that, it was more of like happening for Natsu at the time rather than like anything that gave us information on Gildarts. It showed character connections and stuff, but outside of that, it wasn't as crazy as like, say, like, you know, with Kanna's backstory, we knew Gildarts at one point was married. That's something we do know. And then we know Ivan and him didn't like each other. I mean, they probably still don't like each other, but they had beef. There's really nothing else we can get of Gildarts in the story. I mean, he met at one point, but again, there's not a lot for really when you think about it. Like, think about like all the other major members of the guild, all the big people, like even some of like the ones directly adjacent to like the bigger people like Freed and Big Slow have gotten, I would say, arguably around the same level of content as Gildarts. And these are at the end of the day, minions of Laxus. These are Laxus's like pretty much his goons with the Thunder Legion. So when you compare like characters like that having about as much of like total character content, like they're everything we like that encompasses that pretty much the whole of their character, like events in the story, backstory, abilities, design, pretty much everything. They actually, you could probably say they have more because of stuff like, you know, added small scenes and like having a little bit more role in Alvarez, since Gildarts didn't show up to the very end. But regardless of which, it is something that I wanted to go over because I think there is a I think there's a very viable and credible, like, guess as the connection point. One, it would also explain, okay, well, it was explain Kirin's large amount of magical power. We don't know, like, the straight boost you get once you become a Dragon Eater. I would assume it's pretty significant based off of, like, how powerful the Dragon Eaters have all been. But I also would assume that Georg would go for people that were, you know, that had high potential, high strength. And I think it would just make a lot of sense to me that you would have a, like, say Gildarts' cousin or brother or whatever, somebody in his family having also very high level of magical power. It would make sense of why giving them dragon abilities would boost them even further. And as well as, like, even age-wise, he has a similar, he looks like he's probably, like, in his mid-40s, kind of like Gildarts or something. Because he's definitely older. Like, Suzaku's, like, what, like, in his 20s, same with Masaki, whereas Haku looks like he's, like, 12 or 13. But either way, yeah, that's mostly it for this video. I just want to, I've been ranting a little bit extra than I planned. But it is something that I find very fascinating, because I've been really hoping for some Gildarts content in 100 Years Quest, since he was associated with 100 Years Quest upon his introduction. So I think it would be really cool to finally see stuff for Gildarts in all this. And it goes with my theory that Gildarts will die in the 100 Years Quest, just as a last minute thing to kind of slide in this video. Because I feel like he's the most logical, heavy impact one for it. Because you can't do it with Makarov again. That guy needs to die comfortably in peace in the guild. Whereas I think you can get something still really amazing with Gildarts. But anyway, other than that, comment below. Thumbs up the video, but from the like button, subscribe button, check out my other videos. But I appreciate everybody who's already subscribed. Thank you all for listening. Bye.